Pascal, c'est toi aujourd'hui qui nous propose de nous pencher sur la recherche dite Art-Based Research, une question que nous proposons en collaboration avec le amberNetworkFestival qui se tient à Berlin et en ligne depuis différents lieux entre mars et mai 2021. Nous remercions Ekmel Ertan pour cette collaboration. Alors, la recherche dite Art-Based Research est une pratique émergente dans le champ de l'art et nous allons voir comment cette pratique invente de nouvelles formes de savoir et comment elle est générative de transformation sociétale. Cette discussion va se tenir en anglais avec nos deux invités. Pascal, je te passe la parole.
Oui, Fabienne, bonjour à nos auditeurs berlinois, to our Berliner auditors. I will introduce our guest in French. And then we will have our discussion in English. Je vais présenter nos deux invités en français, puis après nous aurons cette discussion en anglais. Donc, nous accueillons pour ce journal des alternatives Nicolas Zembashi. Bonjour Nicolas. Hi, how are you?
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Frédéric Nauczyciel. Frédéric, bonjour. Voilà. Enchanté. Alors peut-être quelques mots. If you could find the translation of this introduction in the chat if you want the English translation. Nicolas, vous êtes chercheur en architecture et animateur à Forensic Architecture. Forensic Architecture, ou en français on commence à utiliser le terme d'architecture d'investigation, répond à l'urbanisation de la guerre et des conflits. La plupart des conflits, émeutes, manifestations qui se produisent à travers le monde se situent principalement dans des villes. Forensic Architecture mène des enquêtes sur les violations des droits humains commises par les États ou des sociétés au nom de groupes issus de la société civile. Basée à Londres, Forensic Architecture est une équipe interdisciplinaire composée d'enquêteurs comprenant des architectes, des universitaires, des artistes, des cinéastes, des développeurs de logiciels, des journalistes d'investigation, des archéologues, des avocats et beaucoup de différents chercheurs de différentes disciplines artistiques. Merci Nicolas, encore. Frédéric, vous êtes un artiste visuel français, travaillant entre Paris et Baltimore. Vous réalisez des photographies, des films et des performances. Depuis 2011, vous déployez votre travail entre les ghettos noirs de Baltimore et la périphérie parisienne, puisant dans la force des langages performatifs tels que le voguing, les fanfares déambulatoires ou la langue des signes. Je vous cite à propos de votre installation The Fireflies, nous sommes en 2013. En me rendant à Baltimore, je me lance un défi, une commande passée à moi-même. Représenter les possibles de la banlieue française, levée dans les replis encore ignorés de son histoire récente, post-coloniale. Créer des images qui troubleraient notre vision européenne de l'urbain par une sorte de torsion de l'intérieur. Cette posture politique de l'antivisibilité, cette manière organique en perpétuel mouvement d'habiter le monde m'intéresse artistiquement. Merci Frédéric encore pour cette présence à cette conversation. So, before we begin our exchange, I propose that we watch an extract from one of the works of forensic architecture entitled Triple Chase, and after we will go back to you, Nicolas.
On November 25th, 2018, U.S. agents fired tear gas at migrants on the Tijuana-San Diego border. The tear gas was manufactured by the Safariland Group, owned by Warren B. Kanders, the vice chair of the Board of Trustees of the Whitney Museum of American Art, which commissioned this work. In response, Forensic Architecture is training a machine learning classifier to search for images of tear gas grenades manufactured by the Safariland Group. We took as our test case the Triple Chaser tear gas grenade manufactured by Defense Technology, a subsidiary of Safariland. Computer vision using machine learning begins by training a classifier to recognize objects in images. Bounding boxes and masks tell the classifier where in the image the tear gas grenade exists. This process usually requires a training set of thousands of images, but we were only able to identify fewer than 100 images of the triple chaser online. So, we set out to create a synthetic training set. We reached out to activists to find and photograph triple chaser grenades. An insurance claims adjuster named Mikol sent us this video from Tijuana. And artist Emily Jassir sent us this from her Bethlehem Art and Research Center, probably the most tear-gassed artist residency in the world. From these, we created a digital model according to the specifications in the product catalog. We recreated all the permutations of triple chaser branding around the world. And using this model, we generated thousands of images. We set the model against bold patterned backgrounds to ensure that the classifier learns to identify the grenades, rather than the common elements of the backgrounds in which they often appear. We used colored masks to tell the classifier where the grenades are in the image. We also placed the model in photorealistic environments. In 2016, Warren B. Kanders gave $2.5 million to the Aspen Music Festival. In thanks, the festival renamed the Sunday concert series in his honor, the inaugural evening of which began with a performance of the 4 Last Songs by Richard Strauss.
And in this too short extract, we can perceive some elements of the investigative processes you mobilize. Nicolas, would you like to specify some important issues of this approach, of your approach in forensic architecture?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, I'd like to say that was what you just saw was basically the second project in our endeavors to use machine learning as an investigative tool. And part of our mandate is to always try and push for how to include new technologies in the field of human rights, and also to investigate the tool itself. So yeah, in that case, we use a lot of sort of the techniques that we're good at in our spatial expertise as visual investigators and animators, constructing 3D models and then creating these synthetic data sets, as you've seen, these 3D renderings of the object, especially in a case where in many cases around the world where you would have illegal munitions, but you might not have enough imagery to show a machine to learn what it's looking for. You might only have 100 or 200. So that was kind of the technique that we were developing there, and we have kept developing since then.
And forensic architecture is extremely complex. It's a kind of forum, or rather maybe a kind of ecosystem of media, NGOs, the legal institutions, the art world. How you could define this ecosystem of forensic architecture?
Yeah, I mean, as multidisciplinary as is our own kind of like fabric of working researchers, is also the fora that we engage with. So in the context of the project that we just saw, that was very kind of like focused in like an art, in the kind of art world context, or in the exhibition space. But at the same time, it was also traversing into legal spaces. At the end of that investigation, we also submitted some evidence to a legal body, an NGO in Europe, the European, the ECCHR, and they submitted a letter, for example, to the ICC, to pressure Safariland, a subsidiary that like Warren Candace owned, to tell them of their complicity in war crimes. So we kind of traverse the different fora, and it depends on kind of the research questions and the groups and the communities that we deal with. So we're never always in one.
And very often we could read that you refuse to say that to declare that you are producing art, but you're producing something else. As you could you describe what you try to produce? You try to have some effect on the society, to have some effect on the public decision.
Yeah, so we consider kind of like the realm in which we engage is, but it is a realm of aesthetics very much so, but like politics as aesthetics, and we find that like aesthetics are very political, and we kind of find agency in that. Aesthetics also has perception, the way we perceive media literacy, and we feel like both investigating that and also providing tools in which there could be a pedagogy around that to get to disseminate knowledge and about media literacy and kind of civil society, and give civil society kind of forensic or counter-forensic rather tools in which to challenge authorities that usually monopolize the tools of forensics.
And sometimes also you are going on the border between truth, counter investigation. How you could define this link or your relation with truth and civil truth and?
Yeah, we consider the process of truth as a process of open verification. That information in an open source context, in the way that we receive it online and in all the different kind of like media in which we engage. Like we're so inundated with information that like our approach is to always be open about both our practice of verifying it and cross-verifying it, both with the communities that we work with and with the way that we use our tools. And that way we find that we reach the truths that we seek in our investigations through a process of always fact-checking ourselves and each other and the media that we engage with. So we don't take truth as like this monolithic object, and we find that like a process should be engaged with civil society to create a commons for truth, to reach that common understanding. Yeah.
And I would like a more personal question. Why you personally have joined forensic architecture as a researcher in architecture? You have decided to join this group, and why? Because?
Yeah, sure. That is quite a personal question indeed. But it's different for a lot of us because we have such varied backgrounds. My background's in architecture. I studied in our architecture school here in London. In my education, I engaged with a lot of filmic and animation techniques, and I was always personally interested in how we could use space and spatial philosophy, spatial techniques, even virtually, to express different ideas and engage with different topics. I myself have also used machine learning in my personal projects, and yeah, forensic architecture presented a ground for opportunity where the social kind of agency of the architect is something that I found that I could explore more, and also through the tools that I was comfortable with and developing in an academic context as well. So.
Thank you, Nicolas. We will go back to some question after maybe the introduction of Frederick. Frederick, I don't know if you like the term of investigator, but in your own way, maybe you explore also the social space or the political space. So just before the exchange, I suggest like for Nicolas to watch a few minutes of a video. You shoot this video in La Courneuve, the suburb of Paris, and the title is Marching Band Paris Project. Frederick, could you say a few words about what we have just watched, maybe before or it changed?
Yeah, the film and the work is already 6 years old almost, and it's the start of a very, very long adventure that still is going on. That makes me think about what is a generative practice as an artist. It's a marching band in the sense of the marching band units that you find in the neighborhoods in the city like Baltimore, which is not a university marching band. It's more like less highbrow, less educated marching band where the music is only drums. And we created with Marquise Revlon, who is a Vogue performer from Baltimore, from the transgender black scene in Baltimore, in a city like Baltimore, and also a choreographer for these marching bands who exist like, there are 15 of them in a city like Baltimore. And we decided as a joke first to create a marching band in Paris. And this marching band actually is the idea of how amateur practices are experts. How we have sometimes in France the problem with the terms of amateur. Amateur for me is someone who is very good at what he's doing. He has a knowledge that maybe sometimes is not academics, but there is a transmission from generations to generations to generations, like voguing, marching band, all these urban ideas are maybe 100 years old already, even more. And we kind of lost it in city in countries like France, for example. What we kind of there was a heritage of harmonies, for example,
Orpheon
and we are losing. And in a way, this work is also how to reactivate and to dig in our European ideas through American ideas. Also, the marching band is what we call an inclusive place. The idea is that we are going to try to mix in this project, like back in the day, white musicians from conservatories, means educated, with people from the hood of Baltimore, with transgender people from the Vogue scene, and hip hop dancers and youngsters, also very young teenagers from a deaf school that we were working with. And the idea was to create a space where everybody could be himself, but through the practice of the marching band, which is music and dance, and also improvisation, which means you don't have to learn a choreography, you just have to follow a leader, how we can be ourselves in being very in unison. And that was an incredible experience that led us to think about what it is to, for example, some of the musicians had to go through certain preconceived ideas, like what is racism, what it is to be led, and sometimes shout out by a black person, which never happens where you live in France and things like that. So we had to go through the practice, through a very empiric approach. We go through all these ideas of post-colonialism, post-racism, post-genderism, post-generation, transgeneration ideas of how to put together.
So you have conducting a research that you have entitled Safe Places, and I know that you have you change a little bit your mind regarding this word of safe places. Could you so which kind of place you are trying to build, and why these terms of safe places is not so easy now for you?
First of all, I would like to say something. Talking when I was listening to Forensic,
yeah, if you want.
There is something that is very relevant to me, that is obvious to me now, that a lot of people who want to be aware in a possessive approach of artivism, art and activism, we decide to work in a collective way. We're not alone.
One of my questions, so thank you.
Collective or collaborative is more interesting than participative. The participative way of using people inside a work, and then you go from one population to another. Here, I decided to create, like over the years, it's been 10 years that I've been working with people from Baltimore, from Paris, to put in inside a work people who become collaborators, who are also have a total different point of views, and we can have a critical conversations about where we're at and where we're going and what we're doing. It also creates a new form. And the other thing that you were asking about, am I an anthropologist, for example? I would refer to Pier Paolo Pasolini theorem, with this guy arriving in a family, and by his presence reveals everybody in the family's singularity and desire through the aspect of seduction, sexuality, of just his presence as a man in the. So I would consider Pasolini's approach of how you disturb an environment and what it creates as less anthropologist, but as a art-based protocol for me. So to come back to your question, what was the question again? Sorry.
The question was about this safe places terms. We use a lot of these terms at this moment. Everybody talk about safe. Everybody, quite a lot of person talk about.
Yeah, we're talking about care, about safe place.
Yes, and this connection with the care, effectively.
So for me, it's of course, because working a lot with African American artists and thinkers, they use this term a lot, sometimes on non-mixity approach, things like that is very critical here and controversial.
Yes, and problematic, yes, definitely.
I wouldn't say problematic, but controversial.
Controversial, sorry. No, sorry, it's more the English. I'm thinking about controversial, yes, not problematic, definitely.
But, so the idea also was first to use this term as not as assessment or a statement, but as a question. And of course, just like in Pasolini's work, like you never are the same. Just like the sentence that you read at the very beginning, you're never the same, and you keep going with thinking, and you criticize your own thoughts to go further because you got more knowledge. And that's the idea of circulation of knowledge. So first of all, when I was thinking about safe place, I don't know how it became obvious at a certain point that the idea of safe place, which begins to be, this is my safe place, I'm doing yoga, this is my safe place, used to starting to be a word or an expression that was appropriated by people who are not, for whom this work doesn't really belong. So first of all, the idea of unique safe place doesn't operate. So it started for me to think about safe places. Where are the safe places? So I was starting to try to think of trying to find the safe places that already existed in order to create my own safe spaces. And then I started to translate it into another word, like spaces of proximity, or areas of trust. I was always trying to challenge this idea of. It's because when I came back from Baltimore the first time, when I created a video installation, I have the intuition that it shouldn't be a documentary on one wall. It should be an immersive video installation. Coming back with the idea of this culture, this very flamboyant culture of voguing in a city like Baltimore, which is really needed in a very depressed economically and politically city. So I was invited at Magval, and we created this installation while the voguing scene in Paris were about to organize itself with young kids from, Black transgender young kids from Paris. And they took over the installation and they started to perform inside the installation, because for once in a museum, in a art museum, there was a space dedicated for them in a way. And they took over the installation. They got the key of the installation. They took the key and they were performing and asking the audience of the Magval to actually be the judges of their battles. Means the audience of the Magval couldn't understand exactly what they were doing. They would understand that they were actually have the responsibility to judge something they didn't know. So suddenly, who is knowing and who is le voyant, how do you say that?
Outside, inside,
is totally reversed. And that was what we call a safe place. But now, the more I'm thinking about that, I was thinking about how to create a new spaces that I call now spaces of celebration, because it was really a celebration.
I know, Nicolas, you have to leave for a seminar, so I will go. We could go to the chat and to see if you have a question just before you leave from our auditors to Nicolas, and after I will go back to.
I have a question to Nicolas.
If you have a question, ask the questions.
Where are you? I'm not sure.
And after the chat.
You certainly said it, but where are you based? I mean, the collective all over the world, or?
Our collaborators are all over, but forensic architecture is based at Goldsmiths University in London. So we're quite London-centered, but we work a lot. We have a lot of people working in Berlin and all over.
And you had a collaboration with Disclose in France regarding the after the demonstration, the dates of Zainab Redouane. You work with some French organization also, maybe?
Yes, we did. So we worked with Disclose. We worked on that case specifically, and we are working, like at the moment, we've got other kind of collaborations through colleagues who had worked in forensic architecture before, based in France. One of our colleagues, Francesco Seblagondi, he's like working in France, deploying a lot of forensic architecture methods through a group called Index. And he was coordinating essentially the Zineb case. Yeah, if there's a specific question on
that. No, it was because it's regarding this question of this kind of worldwide organization where you could work from everywhere. So maybe questions. Yes, a question for Nicolas.
We had a question about the work Nicolas is doing in France. So it was also about Zainab Redouane case.
You have worked on the Zainab Redouane case, or it's something?
I haven't worked personally. I of course know the work and engaged with it. So the degree of detail I would give is like limiting.
So maybe you have a question for Frederick. We could play the reciprocity before a question.
No, thanks also for your kind of like work, Frederick, and like seeing it as well. And what you've said was like spoke to a lot of things that like it made me think about like how processes overlap. And when you talked about especially how like this kind of tension between or problematic controversy rather of like between participation versus collaboration, is just to spin it back to like how I guess I would like see it in our work as well. And I don't know if you would agree, but like this notion of collaboration, like I find whether then it would be interesting to see what you think, but like how you see yourself, sometimes we see ourselves as a tool, not so much as like necessarily as kind of producers of a piece. We also see ourselves as a tool for communities and NGOs and whoever we're engaging with to use us and speak through us. And that sometimes we find really important in the form of like pursuing collaboration and like understanding notions of truth and like and developing and research around investigative questions. So I don't know what you think about like yourself as a tool, maybe.
Well, it's difficult. I never thought about this idea of tool that I hear more and more, especially in collective like yours. And I think it's a very interesting idea. The only thing is that there is one moment where you have to be aware from where you come from in the work that I'm doing. I'm more producer at first. I'm also a producer, and I do assume this responsibility because I'm the one who is coming most of the time with the budget or the power of the privileges, especially when you work with people who are don't have those privileges as being non-white or being transgender or being queer or being in the society. So my idea is to create spaces where we can create together a space, but I'm producing the space at first, and then I can also but we can I'm starting to use that the collective that we have, like we are going to be in residency somewhere, and I suggested that I wouldn't be the one to be in residency, but the whole collective, and one of the people of the collective would take care of the whole residency. It's also a way to pass on the responsibility, the power, the money, the keys of the spaces. So as I'm working with a lot of people who are very different, some educated, some academic, some not, some self-taught, it's totally rather different to say that we are going to be a tool. But most of the people are engaged in communities, and that comes close to what you call it, a tool. That we took our practices as artists and we use it also to impact a community, for example.
Thank you, Nicolas. And I think you have to leave. So if you have to leave. But if you could stay also. The last question from the chat for Frederick.
Yes, I think it's for Frederick. What are your next artistic research and future specific investigation topics?
Well, oh, wow.
I think we could have the same question for Nicolas.
Yes.
But I would say that, for example, like Celebration is a program that I conducted in Cité des Arts for 3 years, sorry. And now I'm working with a group of students in École d'Art de Marseille, in the art school in Marseille, in the south of France. And the idea of Celebration is to open up a space for queer and decolonial ideas inside of a more white and more one vision institution with reference that are more Europeans, etc., etc. So how can we open up a space with these students so they have the keys to make the whole school get inside a work where decolonialism and queerness is not just a subject, but a way of thinking, a way of being, a way of practicing. So that is, and one of the tool that I'm using is that to come back to collaborative aspect, is that, for example, in talks, I would invite Lisa Revlon, who is American, she's self-taught, she's a transgender woman living in a very poor environment in Baltimore, but she's also an activist, a writer. She's working with women who are drug users and children. And it's very interesting to get her into the work with the students because she hasn't been in art school, but she has seen things that is not mine, so we can avoid to be in what we call entre-soi. How do you call that?
Yeah.
Of being entitlement, to avoid any kind of entitlement. So in Celebration, we are trying to create this kind of space more than a place in the art school of Marseille.
And Nicolas, what is your next project?
We're working on a few things that we can't openly talk about until we release, of course. But we
yes, the world is the world. You know, you have certainly a lot of subjects. Yes.
But we're definitely for example, to bring it back to the topic that you've introduced us with, we continue to pursue kind of the machine learning research in other projects where we can, and we also, the tools that we develop, like you'll see in other investigations, we did one not very long ago on the Black Lives Matter protests, and that's still kind of ongoing as well, in terms of more specific areas to investigate. But we developed further our time map tool, which is about mapping incidents, linking it to media, and placing those events on a timeline. And it's interactive. Anyone can access it. Anyone can see the evidence, link to the sources, and all of those kinds of tools that we continue to develop through projects. They get released in the code is released, so anyone who's has an expertise in coding or even with a machine learning project as well, the data sets get released, the code gets released. So we're furthering kind of the open sourcing of our tools as a project, And we're also trying, like even in recent cases, like the Ahmad Erakat case, that was one of the most recent ones we released. We try to work with collaborators on the ground a lot more. In the sense, and what I mean by that, like in the projects that we're working on now, as well as like to disseminate our knowledge and like provide training and like and research expertise to students and other kind of researchers in the field. So there's always like stronger feedback, and that's kind of, I guess, the way that we're going forward as well in the projects that we're doing right now.
Thank you for both of you. This moment is really definitely too short because I have a lot of questions and chance to things to exchange. So thank you for you both. Thank you for Ekmel in Berlin regarding of collaboration for this moment. And I hope our Berliner auditor and maybe our Turkish auditor, maybe, we could continue this exchange. And if we receive some message, we send it to you.
Yeah, Nicolas, I'd love to keep in contact with you.
Yes, if you want. And we could give the contact of each other. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Les processus artistiques donc mettent au défi les notions de marginalisation et d'inclusion, tous ces mots que nous utilisons peut-être mal. On l'a vu, la question de ces espaces sont effectivement assez controversés, d'endroits où on peut travailler aujourd'hui. Mais bon, ces processus activent des transformations quand même pour plus de justice sociale. Peut-être ils permettent d'habiter le monde un peu plus critiquement. Ces démarches, en tout cas, viennent questionner, je crois, profondément toute logique. On parlera tout à l'heure d'économie dans la matinée, mais bon, ils questionnent aussi les logiques de production, les logiques de diffusion de la création artistique, culturelle, créative. Lors de nos précédents rendez-vous, les 2 derniers vendredis, nous avons pu voir que les défis contemporains demandent des approches collectives. Et derrière ce terme collectif, on a pu voir peut-être que participation, c'est peut-être pas tout à fait ce qu'il fallait regarder, mais regarder d'autres processus qui engagent tous les acteurs de manière commune. Alors, c'était peut-être... et je remercie encore Nicolas et Frédéric pour ce moment... en tout cas, qui montre que l'art s'emploie à toucher ces choses